Hello everyone, this is Carl speaking, and today I will be making these interlocking wall sections for Warhammer, Song of Ice and Fire, or pretty much any wargame which uses a scale in the neighborhood of 28mm. You can of course scale it up or down to fit your preferred scale better. The interlocking mechanism is inspired by the locking tiles from Wylock's Armory, link in the description, with some modifications which I will explain later. The core of each wall is made of thick cardboard. In my case, this is 3.5mm thick card, which I salvaged from the back of a drawing book. For each wall I cut out two 6" by 15mm rectangles, one 6" by 5mm rectangle, and one 5" by 10mm rectangle. I also marked the center line on each rectangle to make it easier to align them, and glued them together, referencing the bottom edge. Then I put the piece under some weight while the glue dried. Remember to set down some baking paper, because sloshing too much PVA glue all over the place will make your pieces stick to your working surface. To make the corners, I took the center line and backed off the thickness of one sandwich, then cut the piece along that line. This makes both walls coming off the corner the same length. Just remember to glue the short piece to the long piece and not the other way around. To hold this in place while it dried, I used a corner clamp, although if you don't have one, you can improvise using some blocks of wood and multiple clamps. Just make sure you use some baking paper or scotch tape on the wood so your piece doesn't get glued to it. Okay, now that the cores are done, the rest is basically set dressing. You can finish your walls off in any style you like, but I'll show you how I did mine. First I took some foam core. The foam core I used is good quality and the paper sticks to it really well, so I used it as it is. If the paper on your foam core strips off easily, remove it now. I sliced some 5mm strips of foam core, about 3 per wall, and cut them up into little bricks. Then I divided each brick in half. This makes the bricks very regular, which is great for the look I was after. When I had a pile of bricks, I started to glue them to the walls, again referencing of the bottom edge. For the corners, I did the offset tiles at the very corner first, and then continued as with the other walls. Again, lay down some baking paper to avoid accidental glue downs. You may notice I'm deliberately leaving some overhang at the end of each wall. This is because it's much easier to overshoot and cut to length later than it is to get a precise lineup. The less you have to think and fine-tune, the faster the work goes, and when you have something like this, every second you save gets multiplied by the number of rows of bricks you're gluing down. Once one face of each wall was firmly glued in place, I took a knife and flush cut the ends, and got working on the other side. To make the bricks for the top of the wall, I cut some more bricks half an inch long and roughly as wide as the wall, including the foam cladding I had just added. Again, I split them in half, and this time I also sliced off the paper that was attached to them. If you do not do this, the edge will be very visible once it's painted. At the very least, it's very visible to me. Again, I waited for everything to dry and started to coat the wall in a mix of PVA glue and black ink. The idea here was to use the PVA to harden the foam, and the ink was there so that I could see where I had painted, and if I had missed anywhere. It turns out that this mix gives an interesting mossy stone kind of effect, which I will experiment a bit with in a future video. Again, remember to use baking paper. At this point I'm going through so much baking paper, the locals probably suspect I'm running some kind of underground bake club. After everything had dried again, I gave everything an undercoat of Payne's Grey. This color goes on pretty blue, but it turns almost black when it dries. And with the undercoat done, I got ready to paint all of the things. Here are the colors I picked for this: Payne's Grey and Ivory for the main colors, and Burnt Umber and Unpronounceable Green to add some dirt. I also got my white ready but ended up not using it. The paint scheme was fairly simple. I gave everything multiple dry brush passes with progressively lighter mixtures of grey and ivory. Using a wet palette helped a lot as I was able to mix large quantities at one time and keep most of the walls fairly consistent. The thing to bear in mind is to brush mostly from the top of the wall to the bottom and to avoid lining the ends of the wall, as that will highlight the seams when the walls are next to each other. About halfway through the brushing, I added a wash of burnt umber along the bottom row of each wall, and then a wash of green covering roughly half the area of the burnt umber. This gives a subtle dirt effect and varies the color a little. After that, I dry brushed under a couple of layers of grey and ivory and sealed everything with a spray sealer. The last thing you will need are the tabs to lock the walls together, and these are just simple rectangles of the same card I used to make the walls. Single layer 1/2 inch by 8mm. That's slightly smaller than the gaps in the core to give them some error tolerance. I also clipped their corners to make them easier to attach. To lock the walls together, just put one tab in the gap in one wall section and push the other section into it. This is fairly strong, but it's weaker than the system Warlock uses because it's only closed on 3 sides, so you can't really carry a joint section around by one end. The reason for this is that I want to be able to remove sections from the middle of the wall without disturbing other sections, like when a cannonball or a rampaging giant invalidates the warranty. And that's it for this project. I will probably revisit it at a later point to add some stuff like a gate and maybe some ruined sections, but for now that should be enough to play with. If you have any suggestions for more terrain pieces, do let me know in the comments below. At the moment I'm going to be making 3D versions of the car terrain in the Song of Ice and Fire box set, except maybe the corpse piles, but I'd be happy to take on any suggestions. If you enjoyed this video, hit the like button, subscribe, ring the notification bell and all that stuff. And if you have any suggestions for improvements, please leave me a comment below. In the meantime, thank you for watching and hope to see you again soon.